Right, so today's video, it's only going to be a short one, but I'm just going to talk a little bit about what you can kind of do to your lawn, or probably more importantly, what you shouldn't do to your lawn during a bit of a heat wave or quite a hot, dry spell, particularly in the UK, because if you make a mistake at this time now, it can have a little bit of a knock-on effect to your lawn, make it look a little bit naff if you do the wrong things in the wrong way. So let's start off by talking about probably the most important thing, and that's going to be the height of cut. What you're going to want to do is leave a little bit more length on your lawn than you usually would. And that's because the leaf blade, even though it's a store of energy for the plant, it's also a store of water too. Think of ourselves as human beings. Most of what we're made up of is water. These grass blades are exactly the same. So the longer the grass is, the much larger the store of water, isn't it right, Fred, is actually going to be. And that'll just result in your lawn just being much more drought tolerant. Whereas if you bring the height of cut down, you've got to think that those tiny grass blades will only hold on to a small amount of water. It's more likely to turn brown much quicker. I've been cutting this lawn recently at around about 15 mil, but I've left it for the past few days just to allow it to have a little bit more length, and when I get on and cut it in a moment, I'm going to take it down to just 20 mil just to keep it a tad longer. However, if you have just recently cut your lawn and it's at that sort of height that you usually keep it at, then what you might want to do is leave it for the next few days. It's not really worth getting on and stressing your lawn just for the sake of it. We do have to cut regularly to maintain a nice, thick, densely packed sward. However, a few days during a heat wave, just letting it do its thing and protect itself is not going to do any damage at all. And another thing to consider doing as well is actually mulching your grass clippings, and that just basically means that when you cut your lawn, just allowing those clippings to stay on the grass and not removing them and chucking them in the wheelie bin. Now, we're not talking big, massive monster fellas and leaving them knocking about everywhere. We're talking about just taking the tiniest part off the top of your grass plant, letting that fall down into the canopy. And what it'll do is, like I said, those grass blades are filled with moisture, good nutrients. They're going to break down, it's going to recycle that water back into the soil, but it's also going to fill the canopy a bit as well and help it to retain just a little bit more moisture than it would usually do without that happening. And ideally, you're not going to want to cut your lawn when it's in the blazing sun. You might want to wait till a time like now, when get later on into the evening or even early morning when the grass is in a bit of shade, so you're not exposing that newly cut leaf blade to the heat of the sun. Now, that doesn't mean that if you're cutting your lawn really short at the moment that you need to leave it to grow into an absolute jungle. This is a lawn that I've been cutting at around about 8 mil quite regularly for the past few weeks, and last week I finally sort of took it down to 5 mil, and I've only sort of changed my mind to let it grow a little bit longer with this small sort of heat wave we've got coming at the moment. So I still am going to give this a cut, but rather than taking it down to 5-6 mil, I'm going to keep it at around about 10 mil. But what it will mean is that this lawn will need a little bit more water, a little bit more regularly than the 20 mil lawn down at the bottom. Now, I have just said don't cut your lawn in the blazing sun. At time of recording, it's around about 19 degrees or so. So it's just before the heat wave is about to hit. So getting on now in the sun is going to be absolutely fine. But again, it's about just mulching those clippings. So there we go, we can still maintain a lovely sward even in these fairly hot temperatures. And even though I have cut this short, like again, get right close to the canopy, you can see it's so unbelievably dense. So it just means that that tight canopy is going to trap all that moisture in. And because we've left the lawn a little bit longer and we've mulched those clippings, it's just going to mean that we're not going to need as much water going down. However, the same rule still applies as to what applies to all of the spring and the summer, and that's water a lot in one go. So you're not going to be doing a lot of little waterings across the week. Give it literally 20 to 30 minutes with the sprinkler if we are having a particularly hot spell, and that way it's going to enable the water to soak down properly into that soil, and then leave it for around about 4 or 5 days. Give it a week. Honestly, it's not going to need as much water as you probably think, as long as you've got a thick, dense canopy, which is going to enable that water to be trapped below the surface. So to water your lawn, you don't need anything mad. I mean, I'm using the SumiSoaker today, I just like this because it's a little bit more like rain as it distributes the water across the lawn. And in terms of what times of day are probably best to water your lawn, you know, obviously morning's a great shout because the sun's not up, the water's not going to evaporate off and out of the lawn, but also the evening's a really good time too. Now don't be scared of what you might see online about kind of lawns getting disease during the evening. If you water every single evening, then I'm going to be honest with you, your lawn's going to be getting a fair bit of disease. However, if it is a one-off, like once a week, then you're going to be absolutely fine. The evening's a great time because the water has loads of time to soak down into the soil. And I don't know about you, but before work, I very rarely have time to come out and actually water the lawn. It's more of like an inconvenience at that stage. But just do what works best for you, morning or evening. Just avoid watering in the middle of the day because it can be done, but you're gonna have to put a lot of water down to make sure that most of it doesn't just evaporate. And that's really all you've got to be mindful of during a hot spell like we've got now. And just remember that every lawn is different. This lawn that I'm watering now gets mostly sort of shade from sort of 4-5 p.m. onwards, so during like quite a hot spell of the day it's not sitting in the sun, whereas the one out at the front is in the sun for most of the day baking, so that is going to need more water. It's likely to going to need to be left that little bit longer just to make sure that it doesn't go to crispy tan. However, if it does, if your lawn goes to crispy tan and it starts turning brown, it isn't dead, it's just going a little bit dormant and it will bounce back. However, with this weekend only given sort of those hot temperatures for a few days, it's very, very unlikely for that to happen, just as long as you don't do anything that is going to damage your lawn. So no scalping, no scarifying, no vert cutting really, because anything that's going to stress your lawn out is going to be made 10 times worse by the sun, baking it to absolute death. So thanks for watching today's video. If you found it useful, feel free to give it a like. And if you want to follow along with some very simple and basic lawn care advice that gets you a lawn that looks as decent as what these lawns in the back garden do, then consider subscribing if you haven't already. We're on a crusade to make lawn care simple. The Instagram is Novice Gardener YT, the TikTok is Novice Gardener Official, and yeah, finally, thanks for watching.